Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Justin from Rapzilla.com. I'm here in Fenix Studios in Staten Island. I have a very special guest today, Mr. Brandon Burke, rapper, all the way from Maryland. And he's going to share his heart, his testimony, his story with us, and something pretty unique to anybody that I've ever interviewed before. So let's open it up real quick. Brandon Burke, who are you?
Wow. Well, man, I'm honored first to be here, man. I'm literally just a son, man. I'm a son trying to follow and obey the father, bro. Mm-hmm. I'm a rapper. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm here, to share about that. I'm a musician, songwriter, produce music as well. Right. But I'm a husband. I got a beautiful wife, 3 kids. But man, when it comes to this Christian music thing, I set out to just be a lover of Jesus, bro, and find a way through my worship to be able to articulate the encounters, the experiences, the testimony that God gave me. And so for me, music is a perfect way to do that.
It's the outlet.
It's a great way to do it. What I mean? Rap is a great tool, of creative expression. And so I feel like I'm on a journey with this music thing. I feel like, when God changes your life from what you used to be or what you thought you were to this new walk.
Of course.
It's never what you imagine it to be. Mm-hmm. And so I've actually had a hard time trying to define myself to one thing. But yeah, I'm cool with rapper, man. That works for me, man.
Rapper works. I mean, you are rapping. So yeah. How long have you been doing music?
Wow. I started probably when I was like 10, 11 years old. It's funny being here in Staten Island, I used to listen to Wu-Tang. So I would listen to Wu-Tang, and I remember I would listen to the lyrics, stop it, because back in the day had cassettes, stop it, and then rewind, and then write down the lyrics, like the ones that I could remember. Right. And then that's how I would learn the whole song through that whole process. And so I started then, not even knowing it, just wanting to know how to communicate what they were communicating, and the delivery and all that was kind of developed in that process.
Right,
man.
Figuring out the cadences.
All of that,
and
man.
how they
just
do it.
Imitating what they were doing, and then it became a hobby, and then eventually it became something serious.
I mean, doing it with Wu-Tang, you had 10 different cadences.
Oh, yeah.
And they were all over the place. Yeah. So, I mean, you could figure something. You could figure something out. It's like a mixed bag of stuff.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, because he might not be looking directly at the camera all the time, but he has a huge smile on his face just talking about music and his life. So he's in this. He's for real. Yeah. So, I mean, the one other thing I want to talk about, I think that's really important to your story is kind of how you got here. You had a rare disease, something like 800 people in the U.S. had it, right?
Yeah.
So for you, that kind of spiraled you out mentally, physically, spiritually. Yeah. So can you maybe open that up a bit? Yeah.
So around it's like 1999, I started getting sick, and it started off just to be something that seemed like the flu. But once I got into the hospital with 105 temperatures that they couldn't control, it went from that to we don't know what this is. And the first episode lasted about 2 weeks. Then every 4 to 5 months, it would reoccur. Every time I would go back, it still would be the same thing. Extreme fatigue, couldn't eat, 105 temperatures, having to sleep in beds full of ice. Wow. And they were testing me the whole time. And so literally 5 years into that, every 4 to 5 months, I'm in and out of the hospital. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this rare thing, I was literally a part of the test results, of what this thing actually was. And so at that point, I was in college, I played basketball in college. It was still going on. I wound up getting into my junior year in college, wound up getting kicked off my basketball team for just doing some crazy stuff, man. Mm-hmm. And but in that process, I was still going through this sickness, man. It became a normal part of my life. And the doctors were about 90% sure that they knew that this was something that they thought was from Japan, called Kakushi's disease. And we had never heard of it. And so what wound up happening is in my senior year of school, after I get kicked off my team, I had nothing left. You know what I'm saying? I had ball. Right. Now that's taken away from me. At this point, I didn't have a relationship really with God. And so I'm at college, and I didn't choose to go to college for college. You know what I'm saying? So this was one of the worst years of my life. And now I'm getting sick, and I'm 7 years into this process. And so in that process, man, I kind of just chose to give up. the doctors can't figure this out. I'm at a low place in my life. And it was in that moment, man, having 105 temperature for like a week straight without telling my family or the doctors, because usually when I would get sick, they would take me into the hospital to do test results right away.
Right.
On this particular situation, I'm like, man, I'm sick and tired of this. Like, if something's supposed to happen to me, it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And in that place of like just giving up, man, for like a week, I'm laying in my dorm room. And in that place, man, I recall like a song my mom used to sing. My mom was like a Baptist church going woman, and my dad that raised me was like in the streets. So I navigated more to the street side first, but my mom was always in my ear. You know what I mean?
She was that, your conscious.
She was that, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so in that moment, I recall a song that she used to sing by an artist named Fred Hammond, which is a gospel singer.
Legend.
Called No Weapon. And so something in me just registered like, yo, if this song is real, like if these words mean something and God is real, then show me. And from that, just literally 105 temperature, man, like probably in the worst state I could be in, I walk into my bathroom and I say to myself, I'm gonna sing this until something happens. And if it's real, then something's gonna happen to me. And literally, man, 45 minutes into that, singing that song, not knowing if it was real, but wanting it to be.
Right.
Even in my head thinking like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? You're crazy. But something in me was compelling me to sing. And I sung myself into a breakthrough, man, that moment, man. And I'm standing here today because of that moment, man.
That desperation just forced you to do something totally out of the box.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's kind of that step you need.
Yeah.
Because you have nothing else. What do you have to lose, right?
Exactly. And that's, to me, where I come from nothing, you know, in a sense. We didn't have a lot. And so I see that type of desperation in my parents all the time. You see that in the neighborhood when you create nothing out of something. And so for me, that same reality was applied to God. Like, okay, God, like if this is real, I'm going to go all the way in with this and see what comes out of it. And a miraculous healing came out of it, bro.
So you didn't have anything anymore after that moment?
The story goes, man, after that powerful moment in my bathroom, I go to the hospital the next day, convinced something had happened to me.
So you knew?
I knew.
You already knew?
I knew. I began to tell my mom, but she was like taken back because she had never heard me talk about God. The doctors that had been following me for years had never heard me talking about God. Right. And I'm being radical about this. I'm like, man, I prayed and something happened to me. Like I feel healed. I feel different. And I did. But the test results were still the same. So I'm 2 days into this, and now I'm saying, okay, this don't add up. Like, I feel different. I know something happened to me, but my test results are still the same.
Yeah.
Like, God, what's up? Like, I prayed. Is this thing real? How does this work? You know what I mean? And so in the third day, test results still the same. I'm still having this conversation with God. And in that process, man, was where I believe the Lord spoke to me and he said, will you trust me with your life? And it meant so much to me because all throughout my life, man, I had been in various situations, trials, like situations that I could have been locked up for, could have been killed, you know what I'm saying? Could have hurt somebody else. And I would pray these prayers when I would get in those moments like, God, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again. And when he asked me that question, that was the first thing I thought about, was all those moments where he had literally got me out and I went back and did some of those same things again.
Right.
So I felt this love, but I also felt like that question represented, I did that for you, but you didn't reciprocate. You didn't reciprocate it back. So now it was like the question was, will you trust me with your life? Literally, I knew it was a God moment because this one question, I could see flashes of my whole life within this question, bro. It was a miraculous type of experience. And not only did I see my past, but I see my future. And when I see my future, I seen like 3 different pathways. I seen one pathway was like the evil that I was doing. Like cause at college, I'm selling drugs, I'm hustling. I'm the guy on campus. I'm literally replicating everything I learned when I was in the street where I was raised at. And then on the other side, I seen this good path. And on this good path was like college, degree, you know, all this other stuff that I could do that was good. But then I seen this unknown path that was literally full of things that I had never seen myself doing before. It was all these great things that I would do. And I'm seeing this and I'm thinking in my head, I don't know how I'm going to accomplish that. I didn't even recognize that part of myself. But every time I would think of a question like, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to learn this? I see myself preaching. I see myself doing music. At this point, I wasn't really doing music like that.
Right.
And I'm thinking in my head, how am I going to learn this? And all I keep hearing God say back to me is, will you trust me with your life? Will you trust me with your life? And in that moment, all of my life came together in one moment, and it was all about a surrender. It was all about me saying, yes, God, I trust you with my life. When I said yes, literally an hour later, the doctors come in. They say, listen, we don't know what happened. Your test results have been the same for the last 7 years, even the first 3 days, and now everything has changed. Your white count has been ranging from like 800 to 1,200, and it just went from 800 to 6,000 white blood cells, which is exceeding and abundantly above. So that became the first marker, man, of like, yo, God is real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then where did you go from that?
Yeah. So for me, like in that moment, there was a paradigm shift in me. I was in college to become like, quote unquote, some of the doctors that were, trying to heal me. You know what I mean? To become that part of that echelon of type of people in society. And when that happened for me, it was like, God, you did this in 3 days and they couldn't figure this out in 7 years. So my mindset went, I need to know everything else about you. If you can do this, I need to know you in every other area that concerns me, whether it's business, whether it's music, whatever I choose to do, I need to know you. So that began like a personal relationship for me. Well, when that happened, the first thing I was thinking of was, how do I get my friends to know about this? And so I kind of was like, had the thought process, like, they're not gonna hear me preach, because I wasn't hearing the people that was preaching to me. So I was like, I always had this musical gift that I would play with. I would get high and just rap, and my friends would be like, man, you're dope. I even had one of the guys that I used to sell drugs for invest in me and say like, man, I think you're dope. And I had a secular project out at one time, and it wasn't even because I was taking it serious. It's because somebody else saw something in me that was influencing them. And so at this point, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use music. I'm gonna use music as a way to share not only my testimony, but these experiences that I'm getting. And so I charted that territory, bro.
And that would be a more like digestible experience to share with your friends.
Exactly.
Rather than saying, hey, look at me, look what happened, and be like, all right, go away.
Exactly.
Like, but why don't you listen to it over a beat?
Exactly.
Hear me rhyming, and that works.
It's so powerful. I mean, we all know, we've all been influenced by music in some way or another, and so I seen the opportunity to use it, and I just was like, man, let me give it a shot. So that was 12 years ago.
Okay.
It's 12 years ago, bro.
Nice.
Yeah. And so my journey has been one step at a time from then. What happened after that was I had about 6 months left of college, and I went back home, and I was just on fire, man. I went from everything else I was doing to just Jesus, just praying, just seeking him, doing Bible studies, and seeing miracles start to happen. And so it was just this intrigue that kept my hunger and thirst burning. And then I started writing songs and trying to figure out, how do I transition from doing secular music to doing music for God that's not corny, that's authentic and real. Without cussing, you know what I mean? So I had to go through a process and develop that, man. A lot of prayer, a lot of just crying out to God.
You had to change your whole way of thinking.
Whole way of thinking, bro. And so in that process, I moved to Atlanta. And I moved to Atlanta with some of my friends that weren't doing Christian music, but one of the guys was part of the high school I went to. So I went out there just on faith and got out there and got connected with them and just started recording, man. Started recording, got a little job, and just trying to figure this thing out, man. And so that was like the beginning of me saying like, okay, God, like show me how to do this. And while I was there, I was actually working at Target, stocking. Right? I'm stocking at Target, trying to figure out this music thing. I'm sure so many artists, can relate to that right now.
Yeah, the waitress job, the waiter job, the overnight guy.
Exactly, man. Hungry, you have this sense of purpose, and you know there's something that you want to get out, and you're just grinding, you're going hard. And so I remember working that job like about 2 months, and while I was working, once again, I had this moment where I felt like God spoke to me and said, I didn't tell you to work this job. I told you to trust me with your life. And at that moment, I'm like, I don't even have a paradigm for what that means. Like,
what does that mean?
How am I going to provide for myself and all that? And he spoke to me in scripture, which is Matthew 6:33. He said, seek ye first the kingdom and my righteousness, and all these other things to be added. And so I really felt like, okay, even what does that mean? And it was like, I want you to pray like it's your 9 to 5. So literally, I would get up at 5 in the morning to go to work. I literally put a 2 weeks notice in after I got that, and would get up at 5 in the morning to pray. And I began to get up and I just began to pray. And in that season, man, what was happening for me was like God was teaching me how to pray. But he was also teaching me what his will was, not just for my life, but for the arts and entertainment.
Right.
And so I was praying, hours and hours upon a day. And I remember, man, there were so many impactful moments that happened for me in that season. But the greatest thing I learned was God was showing me, Brandon, if you would be about my business, which I learned God's business is prayer. He's like, I'll be about your business. So what started happening is I would pray, then I would be getting songs. Then I would be getting opportunities. And literally, the season became so miraculous that I would have random people come up to me, say, hey, man, I'm supposed to pay for all your groceries while you're here.
Wow.
Hey, man, I'm supposed to give you the money that's in my pocket. I was seeing miracles. I was seeing Matthew 6:33 manifested in my life. But not only that, I was learning purpose for what God was calling me to this music industry before. And out of that came a vision, which is now my organization, called Go-Getters for God. And it basically was like, how do you use creative arts as a vehicle, not only to save souls, but mentor, disciple, bring about community transformation, influence all of culture. And so that was birthed in prayer. And then these songs kind of came out of that place.
Right.
And man, that's why I said for me, it was just about music, and then it shifted into something totally different.
It shifted into helping others while still doing your music.
Exactly.
So that's almost like people say, oh, I want to make music with a message that other people can hear.
Yeah.
But then you never really know how that impact hits people unless you meet them. So now you almost have that instant gratification of, now I could just work with people one-on-one and I know how I'm affecting them immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens when an artist does a song, I know for me, there's always people that are influenced and touched. I think the difference between being a Christian is that we have the power to eternally change lives through what we're sharing. It's the gospel that's infused in that. And so if I look at it just from an artist standpoint, I'm satisfied with just people liking my music, purchasing my music.
Right.
But if I understand that there's something greater behind what I'm doing, then I have to see that this music is just a vehicle. And so I seen that early on, because I would go to events and I would see these kids in the way that they would respond. And they would come up to me. In one sense, it was like, man, I like your music. But I really accredit being sensitive to the Holy Spirit to those places of prayer.
Right.
Because when these kids would come, I would see that naturally. They wouldn't say it, but it would be like God was telling me there's something more you can give to these kids. So that started this process of mentorship and discipleship. And then I started, when kids would come up to me and say, man, like, not only did this song change my life, but like what you're sharing to me is changing my life right now. That became more rewarding than any music, man.
Right.
And you know what I'm saying? And so I was like, this is what I'm doing. And so what would happen was, in that season of faith while I wasn't working, God was providing for me supernaturally. And one of the other ways that he was doing that was some of the parents would see how these kids were being impacted by one song or one conversation. And they would say, hey, can you spend a season with my kid? They was like, we know kind of where you are in your life right now, and we have an extra room in our house. You can stay here, continue to seek the Lord, continue to develop your music, but would you be open to mentoring my son?
Right.
So I just started doing that. I did it with like 2 or 3 families. And in that moment, man, I realized like, yo, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, that took precedence over trying to get my music out to masses of people.
Right, because this was happening and in the moment, and you saw instant results from it. Exactly. So you knew that you were working within your calling. Exactly.
I knew that, you know what I'm saying? And I knew at that point, I was in the transition between figuring out this grind thing and being in God's perfect will, and so I remember times of being extremely frustrated because I had vision, I had music, and I knew it would impact people's lives. But sometimes the opportunities wouldn't be opened up. Right. But I would always have these few people in my life that God was calling me to be faithful to, but I was more focused on reaching more masses of people as well, right? And so I remember one day I was in a church and I was just frustrated, frustrated because I had vision, was ready to move, and things weren't happening as fast. And there was a woman that was preaching in, I think it was like Job chapter 37. It was a scripture about Job, and she said, so that every man may know his work, he will frustrate them in his labor. It's a powerful passage. And I was feeling that frustration in what I was called to do. And it was moments like that, man, that pushed me back, like deeper into prayer, deeper into understanding God. Like, I have my vision for this music, but obviously I'm seeing you doing more than I can even think, just by the fact that I came into this with just wanting to touch people with my music. Now you got kids that lives are being changed. You got a greater work that you want to do. And those moments, man, really helped me focus more on the seasons that I was in, whether it was a season of prayer, intimacy with the Lord, or just working with those 2 or 3 individuals that God had in my life.